No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever. Because they did not meet you with bread and with water on the way.
Shalom.
Even to the 10th generation, none of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever.
May I see?
Because they did not meet you with bread and with what? Excuse me, what are you doing?
What is your name?
Elam.
Your friend Elam has a withered hand.
Are you a healer?
It is not lawful to heal on Sabbath.
Which one of you who has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath will not take hold of it and lift it out?
Who are you to speak to our congregation in such a
Of
way?
how much more value is this man than a sheep?
Stop this at once.
Come here. Come stand here. It's okay.
Elam, sit down. We don't know this person. He could be a shaman.
Is it lawful on Sabbath to do good or to do harm? To save life or to kill?
This affliction does not threaten his life.
It does not even affect his health.
Lift it up. Stretch it out. Feels good, huh?
If he was supposed to be healed, God would have done it himself.
Interesting point.
Get out!
Gladly.
Blasphemer!
What is wrong with you?
Apparently everything.
Wait! Come back!
I think those guys are the town guards. All right, so for those of you who didn't see, first he interrupted the reading simply by standing next to this guy with a paralyzed hand. And then the priest. What?
Reaping or harvesting on Shabbat.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I've been so hungry I forgot what day it is.
You may.
No, get back. Out of the way.
You have made a mockery of our little synagogue and of Torah.
You will tell us your name, your lineage, your virtue, and now your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.
Have you not read what David did when he was in need and was hungry? He entered the house of God in a time of Ahimelech, the priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him to eat, but only for the priests.
You would compare yourself to David.
It was an emergency.
Or have you not read in the law how on Shabbat the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath, but are guiltless?
That's for Levites. Are you a Levite of priestly lineage?
Listen carefully. Something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
The Son of Man.
Let's go.
That title, Son of Man, seems to upset a lot of people. Why? Tell you later.
Good stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in both of these scenes. I'm going to spend the majority of my time giving you a solid understanding of Sabbath. Okay? And so the title for the message this weekend is Sabbath. And by and large, what I want to tell you is that when we take a day to rest, God will take care of the rest. Write those things down. Sabbath. When we take a day to rest, God will take care of the rest. Now, I'm also going to dial in on a couple of other things about this scene and about the Sabbath as we get closer to the end. But let's start with the Sabbath. What is the Sabbath? Some people would say the Sabbath is Sunday. Well, the Sabbath is Sunday. Sabbath is when you go to church. That's what the Sabbath is. To observe Sabbath is to go to church. But that's not really what Sabbath is about. Let me define Sabbath for you. In Hebrew, it's the word Shabbat. And that word means to cease. It means to desist. It means to rest. It means to cease from work or activity. And the first place we see this word is actually in Genesis chapter 2. And you should already be there. But it says, so the heavens and the earth were completed and all their heavenly lights. By the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested. Shabbat. On the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on it he rested. Shabbat. Now there's 5 things that I want to show you about Sabbath as we move forward. And the first one is this. Sabbath was modeled by God. Write that down. Sabbath was modeled by God. I wouldn't think that creating anything, even a universe full of galaxies, would be considered work for God, right? All God had to do was speak and things came into existence, right? And yet, God made sure that mankind understood that he completed his work. And he also made sure that man understood that he rested from all the work which he had done. So really, God modeled for us 2 things. One, that work is important. Think about the very first thing that God commanded Adam to do after he created him. He said, tend the garden, work the garden. Adam may have lived in paradise, but he was still responsible to provide for his family. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8 says that if anyone doesn't provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he's denied the faith. He's worse than an unbeliever. So God showed Adam, and really every man since then, that work is important. Okay, but he also modeled that rest is important. It doesn't specifically say that Adam was told to take a day off, but I personally believe that Adam understood that he was supposed to. And here's why. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, God said, blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it, because on it he rested. Notice that word sanctified. He blessed it and he sanctified it. That word means holy. And really what it means is to set apart or to consecrate or to dedicate, okay? I believe that Adam and Eve understood, because God modeled it, that there was a day that was dedicated to Shabbat, to just rest and hang out. But also in Genesis chapter 3, it tells us that God came to the garden in the cool of the day. Could it be that God came to hang out with Adam and Eve in the cool of the dedicated seventh day? I mean, maybe God came in the cool of every day, but what if God came and hung out all day on the Sabbath day? It's food for thought, right? We don't know for sure. Bottom line, I believe that Adam and Eve observed the Sabbath because God modeled a Sabbath. Okay, let's keep going. Number 2, Sabbath is a gift from God. The first time we see the word Sabbath used as a noun, in other words, the first time it's used as a Sabbath, is in Exodus chapter 16. And you can read that on your own time. But this is when Israel complained about being hungry as they were wandering in the desert. And if you'll remember, God provided for them a daily portion of manna, okay, bread from heaven. For 5 days, it says they saw the bread, they gathered the bread, they prepared the bread, ate the bread. But when the 6th day came around, they noticed that there was twice as much of it on the ground as before. So they said, Moses, what's up with all this manna? That's a lot of manna. And Moses said, God says that tomorrow is a solemn day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, boil what you will boil, and all that's left over lay aside to be kept until morning. And so they laid it aside till morning, as Moses commanded them, and it didn't stink. There were no worms in it. Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. And verse 26 says, 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. Okay, you got to get this. God, in his goodness, wanted his people to be healthy and strong. And so he miraculously provided the manna. Okay, but the manna came in the form of a fine flake-like thing. It literally says fine as frost on the ground, okay, which means it would not be easy to gather. And everyone was responsible for gathering their own portion for their family. And it was a lot of work. But God gave them a gift. On the 6th day, God provided twice as much. Enough to where they didn't even have to think about going out to gather manna on the 7th day. God gave them a Sabbath. God gave them rest. Now, the people were going to have to trust God, right? They were going to have to believe that what they gathered on the 6th day was going to be enough to allow them to rest on the 7th day. But the gift was there, right? I want you to remember that Israel had been enslaved for 400 years. All they knew was 400 years of hard labor. Work. And that's why there were people who had a hard time with this concept of this gift of God. Verse 27 says that on the 7th day, there were some people who went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. God tells him one more time, y'all, the Sabbath is a gift. Enjoy it. Work hard, especially on Friday. Because you guys know that the Jewish Sabbath is sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, right? God is like, enjoy it, work hard, wear your TGIF shirt on the 6th day, but take the 7th day off. And then did you notice that God says, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? At this point, it was a command, don't even go out on the Sabbath, stay home and rest, right? But as far as we can tell, the only repercussion for not trusting God here is that if you don't gather enough on Friday, you're going to be hungry on Saturday. As far as we know, that's the only repercussion. You're going to starve on Saturday if you don't believe me, and save up on Friday, okay? Now, when we get to Exodus 20, which was like 40 days later, God meets with Moses up on the mountain, gives him what we have come to know as the 10 Commandments. And what do we know? Number 3, Sabbath is a commandment of God. Sabbath is a commandment of God. So God models the Sabbath. Then he gives the Sabbath as a gift. And now God's making it an official command. And it's a command that carries consequences when you disobey. Keeping the Sabbath is the 4th commandment, and more is written about this commandment than any of the other 9. Okay? This is Exodus 20, if you're not already there. It says, remember to observe the Sabbath day, this is the 4th commandment, by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. Everybody say ordinary work. Ordinary work. Now say it like you're not completely bored out of your mind. Ordinary work! Liven up. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. Okay, remember that. But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes your sons, your daughters, your male, your female servants, your livestock, any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the seas, everything in them. But on the 7th day, he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. I want you to notice 2 things. 1, God reminds the people that he himself rested, right? Keep the Sabbath, for God created the 6 days and rested on the 7th. Like God modeled it before he ever commanded it. That's something that we as parents should probably pay attention to, right? Before you command it, make sure you're modeling it. Well, because I said so. Right? God didn't do that. I said so. God modeled it, right? The second thing I want you to notice is that Moses doesn't mention anything about going to church. Did you notice that? I don't say anything about going to church. Is church important? Yes. Did the Jewish people go to synagogue and worship on the Sabbath? Yes. But that's not the point of the Sabbath. And we'll talk more about that here in a bit. The main point that I want to make is that keeping the Sabbath made the top 10 list. We're talking about the 10 commandments, right? 10 laws designed to bring abundant life to the people of God. 10 rules for living that when we obey, we thrive. When we disobey, we suffer. You know, under the Old Covenant, certain commands carried the consequence of death. Murder, adultery, rebellion against parents, and breaking the Sabbath. In Exodus chapter 31, it says that everyone who profanes the Sabbath, must be put to death. For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day must be put to death. Twice it says that breaking the Sabbath results in death. God was serious about establishing, not a rule. He wasn't excited about establishing a rule. He was establishing a rhythm. Work 6 days and then rest. Now today, even though breaking one of the 10 commandments is still committing sin, the penalty of sin has been paid by the death of Jesus on the cross. Amen? Right? Like, I'm not going to be killed for coveting my neighbor's lush green grass. Okay? And believe me, there is a story there. I'm not going to be stoned to death for not taking a day off. But 1 Corinthians chapter 10 says that everything that happened in the Old Testament is an example to us. So I may not be killed for not taking a day off, but I could kill myself, right? I could work myself to death. I could become physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually sick. When I was 37 years old, I started having some weird health issues. One of the main things was this crazy numbness in my leg, and there was other things too. And so I went to the doctor. They're like, dude, something's up. And so they do all the things that they do to test you. And finally I said, well, what is it? And they said, well, you are overweight and stressed out. You're fat and you're worn out. I was like, that's not even nice. He said, you're a pastor? I said, yes, that's a very stressful job. It can be. He said, if you don't do something, you're going to die before you're 50. This was when I was 37. I'm 49 right now. That means today could be a funeral instead of a worship service, y'all. It's crazy. But you know what my biggest issue was? Even though I preached about it, I really never took Sabbath. I never really rested. And honestly, by never resting, I was breaking a few other commandments as well. Idolatry, adultery, because ministry had become my mistress, covetousness. Why doesn't my church look like this? Or I want my church to look like that. Let me work to see those things come to pass. And what were the results? The results were on the inside and on the outside, I was dying a slow death, which is the exact opposite of what God had planned for my life. Amen? The exact opposite of what God has planned for all of his people. God wants his people to thrive. Amen? Because he loves us, and because number 4, Sabbath is a witness of God. Write that down. Sabbath is a witness of God. Let's look back at that section in Exodus chapter 31, where God says, you must keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations. And he says it again towards the end of this section. In verse 16, the sons of Israel, everybody say the sons of Israel. The sons of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generation as a permanent covenant. I want you to say permanent covenant. Okay, we're going to need that here in a bit. Verse 17 says, it is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he ceased from labor and was refreshed. Okay, once again, God said, I modeled it before I ever commanded it. And then twice he says that it is a sign. Okay, the Sabbath is a sign. The Hebrew word for sign is the word oath, O-W-T-H. And there's so much meaning in this word. God's saying that the Sabbath is a banner, that it is a distinguishing sign or a distinguishing mark, a signal, a standard. Let me say it this way. Rest is like the logo of God. We all know what a logo is, right? The logo is the distinguishing mark of a company. As soon as we see certain logos, we think of the product that company offers us, right? The distinguishing mark, the logo of God is Sabbath. Now you might be thinking, whoa, the cross is the logo of God. Jesus died on the cross. And that's true, obviously. But what did Jesus' death on the cross provide? Spiritual rest. Because of Jesus' work, everyone who trusts in him no longer has to work for their salvation. They may rest in his unchanging grace. Can I get a collective amen? Yes. I have been saved. Okay? Think of it this way. I have ceased from doing things in my own strength. I have rested in his strength. I've submitted my life to Jesus. Amen? Salvation is synonymous with Sabbath. By putting my faith in Jesus, I have entered his rest. Hebrews chapter 3 and 4 talk all about that. You can read that in your own time. Okay, so this is true relating to my eternal life, but this is also true as it relates to my day-to-day life. How many of you know life can be exhausting? All the doing and the living and the working, the relating, the parenting, right? The marriaging, if that's even a word. And that's why Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." We know these verses. Jesus is saying, when you are weary, which speaks of being physically tired, and you're heavy laden, which speaks of being emotionally tired, he said, bring that to me. I may not be able to take that exhausting thing away from you, but what I will do is refresh you. It's interesting there in Exodus 31, verse 17. I don't know if you noticed it, but it says, on the seventh day, God ceased from his labor and was refreshed. Did you notice that? God himself was refreshed, which is weird to think of God being refreshed or even needing to be refreshed. But that word refresh actually means to take breath. It means to breathe in, which makes sense because God's work for 6 days was to speak things into existence. Breath was going out. And on the sixth day, his breath literally went out and into Adam. Right? His final creation. And that's when God looked up and checked everything out and said, I think we're good. It's all good. And then he breathed in. And he rested. Does out of breath describe how you are feeling about life right now? It's usually a pretty relevant question. Out of breath. I was telling you earlier that we went on vacation. It was really more than a vacation. It was a sabbatical. An intentional time of rest and refreshing. And we went up to Colorado and we did this tour of sites and hikes and we did a ton of hiking. And man, how many of you know the air in Colorado is just crisp and clean? So nice. Now, they were in a really bad heat wave is what they were telling us. We're in a heat wave right now in their 85 degrees. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm so sorry, you know. So us Texans are up there feeling like superheroes. We can breathe. We can go outside, you know. But we did a lot of hiking. We're hiking up trails and then this trail and that trail. And one day, me and a couple of my boys went further up a trail all the way to the top of this area because we wanted to do a mountain run down. And it was going to be about a 3 mile, about a 5K down the trail. And so my boys are young and spry and I'm not as much so. And so I was concerned about how I would feel, but I said, I'm going to do this. Man, I got to be honest. I felt great. I'm just running down this trail, just running and running. I felt so good. At one point, I took out my phone and was videoing it. I got to get this on camera, that this really happened. So I'm like, you know, looking back at it, it looked stupid, and I looked a little more worn out than I thought I was. Yeah, it was pretty bad. I'm not ever going to show that anyway. So when we get home, I think it was the first day we got back, I was like, I want to go for a run. So I went out for a run. I couldn't get past 1.5 miles. I was like, it was so hot and humid, I literally had to stop. I thought, well, I'm just tired from my trip. So I rested a couple days, went out a couple days later, couldn't go more than 1.5 miles. I'm like, this is terrible. Give me Colorado. It's not a good feeling to be out of breath, is it? Like ever. If that describes how you feel about life right now, then maybe you need to begin practicing Sabbath. Maybe you need to stop, take a deep breath in, and be refreshed. Did you know that when we are fresh in life, when we show up fresh, ready to go, show up to work, show up at this, show up at that, wherever it is, when we show up fresh and ready to go, it's like we're wearing the logo of God? 100%. People take note. Man, last week was brutal. How are you so refreshed today on this Monday? Right? People take note. And then boom, we have an opportunity to tell someone about the God that we serve. That's part of what God was telling the people of Israel. When the nations around you see that you only work 6 days a week, but you are way more fruitful than all the nations around you that are working 7 days a week, don't think they're not going to take note. They will, and it's going to become a testimony of the power of the one true God that you serve. It's a witness. To this day, Sabbath is a distinguishing mark of the Jewish people. Even the non-religious Jewish people in Israel observe the Sabbath because it's part of their culture, it's part of their rhythm. And what do we know about Israel and the Jewish people? Arguably some of the most blessed people and nation on the planet when you really start to consider all the things. Which leads me to my last point about the Sabbath as we get back to this scene in the book of Mark. Number 5, Sabbath is a blessing from God. I know that may seem redundant because we just talked about Sabbath as a gift from God, but how many of you know that a gift can be given like with no thought, no heart, no consideration, no emotion, no purpose? We all know that because we all have that family, remember, that does not know how to give a gift. It's like they give terrible gifts. It's awful. It's like, what even is that, right? We all have that. When God gave mankind the Sabbath, he thought it through. He considered what we need. He considered what we want. He read the reviews. He ordered one for himself, right? He used it to make sure it really works. And guess what? Sabbath really works. Which is why Jesus said the Sabbath was made for man. Sabbath was the perfect gift. You know, Jesus was not happy with those religious leaders who valued their rules over the well-being of a person in need. Remember? They were angry at Jesus for healing a person on the Sabbath. And then they were furious at Jesus and his disciples for helping themselves to a few heads of grain on the Sabbath, which is crazy. How many of you guys have ever been casually walking through the woods or somewhere out in the wild and you come across something edible, like a blackberry bush or something, and you bend down and you pick a few of them and you blow them, double check for worms, and then you toss them in your mouth and you eat them, right? Or like wild plums. I grew up in an area that had wild plum trees everywhere. So anytime I would go out in the woods, I would make sure I'd stop by the wild plum trees, and I'd grab me a handful of them. I'd eat them. And then I'd be on my merry way, right? That's just what you do. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Not very many hands. Do y'all not have wild plum trees in your neighborhood? You need to plant some. That's the stuff of life. These religious leaders were like, why are your disciples breaking the Sabbath? And Jesus is like, are you serious right now? Are you on a for real? He knew what these guys were referring to. The Pharisees were accusing them of violating 4 specific man-made traditional Sabbath laws against reaping or threshing or winnowing, or even preparing food on the Sabbath. Can you imagine on your way to church, you pick a few plums and somebody stops and accuses you of preparing Sunday dinner? It's like, are you kidding me? I just ate a few plums. Why is this a big deal? And so what Jesus says is so important. He says the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. He's saying, don't make this about something that it's not. Don't micromanage my gift, my blessing with your religious mindset. Don't make the Sabbath about what you can or can't do. Don't even make the Sabbath about which day of the week. You know, there's a big push right now for Gentile Christians, non-Jewish Christians, to observe the Sabbath. And what's meant by that is you should go back to the Jewish way, the Jewish version of observing Sabbath, which would be from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. That's your Sabbath. And you don't do nothing strenuous, nothing. And if that's not how or when you take your Sabbath, then God's not pleased with you. And that's not right. And you need to know that. You guys remember in Exodus 31 where it says that the sons of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a permanent covenant. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember? Remember? It says, it is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. Saturday should be the Sabbath for Jewish people. It's a permanent covenant for them. Saturday Sabbath is not what saves a Jewish person. Saturday Sabbath is not what makes a Jewish person right before God. A Jewish person could take a different day off if they had to. But I believe that celebrating Sabbath on Saturday is part of Israel's covenantal responsibility as the people that God chose to be a light to the nations. And that's a big topic, I understand, but you need to know that. A Jewish person that comes to faith in Jesus should keep celebrating Sabbath on Saturday. It's part of their culture. It would be wrong to tell them not to. It's their heritage. And it always will be. Do you understand? But I'm not Jewish. And you're not Jewish. Unless you are Jewish. But most of us here are not Jewish. Right? What I'm trying to tell you is that I'm not required, you're not required, we're not required to be circumcised. We're not required to stay away from pork. And I'm also not required to make Saturday my Sabbath. What I am required to do is take a day of rest, completely trusting that God will take care of the rest. Can I get an amen? But listen, and I need you to hear me here. Even one full day of rest isn't possible for some people in certain seasons because of job schedules that don't allow for it or whatever. And so during that season, Sabbath may look like 2 half days. or 4 quarter days, or 3 1/3 days, or 16 1/16 days. At some point it gets ridiculous. You can do your own math of what you need, but y'all hear what I'm saying? Is one full day of rest the best? 100%, because that's what God modeled to us. And studies have even shown that this is the best way to truly be refreshed. One whole day of ceasing from your labor, resting from your mental, emotional, and physical strain of what Exodus 20 verse 9 says is your ordinary work. Well, can I mow my yard? Yes. Can I go to the movies? Yes. There's a couple that came into my office one time for some mediation, some counseling, and he was someone that was really, really, really into getting back to all the Jewish laws, observing Sabbath on Saturday, don't eat bacon, all the things. You hear what I'm saying? She as much was not into it. And so one day she and the kids wanted to go see a movie, and he was furious with her. You can't go see a movie. That would be breaking the Sabbath. And she's like Jesus in that scene. Are you kidding me right now? And so I'm literally mediating between this couple who were fighting about what they could or could not do on the Sabbath. You can go to the movies on the Sabbath. Can I go for a hike? Yes, you can go for a hike. Can I pick plums on my hike? Yes, please do. Bring some back for me. Don't be like those religious goofballs that Jesus was dealing with. Jesus told them, you guys are missing the point. I did not create you to serve the Sabbath. I created the Sabbath to serve you. It's meant to be a blessing, not a burden. Are you with me? The Apostle Paul talks about that a bit in Colossians 2. He says, don't let anyone condemn you. Your translation may say judge. Don't let anyone judge you for what you eat or drink. Talking about Jewish dietary laws. Or for celebrating certain holy days. Talking about the 7 feasts of Israel and other Jewish feasts. Which we talk a lot about around here. But don't let anybody judge you based on those things. Or new moon ceremonies or Sabbaths. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come. And Christ himself is that reality. Now don't be confused. That is not saying that we don't follow the 10 commandments. Jesus was specific about us understanding the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. And that's what Jesus is talking about in this scene as well. Remember, Jesus said the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And the Lord of bacon. And he's the Lord of a lot of other things that people can get seriously religious about. I wished I had time to give you more details of that. I don't. Let me end by sharing with you a few suggestions that will help you be refreshed when you observe the Sabbath. Okay, so I'm going to give you 7 suggestions for a superb Sabbath. Are you ready? Really quickly. My personal Sabbath, by the way, is Monday. I'm obviously working on Saturdays and Sundays. And so on Mondays, my goal is to not think about people or preaching. No offense. But that's what God said. Don't do any of your ordinary work. Well, that's my ordinary work. So I try not to think about the church or do anything related to the church. So number 1, stay away from your ordinary work. When you're taking that full day or 2 half days or 16/16 days or whatever it is you're doing during that time that you've set aside for Sabbath, stay away from your ordinary work. Don't send the emails. Don't meet with the people. Stay away from your ordinary work. Number 2, sleep as much as you can. If you're able to sleep in, sleep in. If you can't, try to find a nap that day. If you can't, go to bed early that night. Whatever you have to do to get more rest. Number 3, eat well and hydrate. Really? Yes! If you're like me, I forget to eat during the week. And sometimes I forget to drink water. Now, I'm going to drink my coffee, right? But I forget to drink water. So by the time the weekend comes around, I'm like, emaciated, tweaking out, right? So whenever it's your Sabbath day, do your best to eat well, like eat. Carb up, you know what I mean, for the next week. And hydrate. Number 4, this goes without saying, but spend quality time with your family. Spend quality time with your family. And number 5, spend quality time with the Lord. It's the whole point. He's the Lord of the Sabbath. So spend time with the Lord on the Sabbath. Read the scriptures. Reflect on the scriptures. Reflect on your life. Pray. Worship. Spend time with the Lord. Number 6, do something you enjoy. Like, what do you love to do? Do you have a hobby? Do you have something that you just really enjoy? Are you a quilter? Then quilt. Right? Do you love to work in the yard? Then work on the yard. Do you love to do the hedges? You just love seeing the hedges nice and straight. There's something satisfying to you about that? Then go out there and do it. That's what it does. That's what does it for you. Whatever it is that you enjoy, do that as much as you can on the Sabbath, because there's something about that that refreshes us. You understand? Number 7, and I say this carefully because this is not the point of Sabbath, but I believe it can be very important on the Sabbath because it was for the Jewish people. Number 7, go to church. Go to church on the Sabbath. Most people are off on Sunday. It's just culturally, that's what our culture has said is our day of rest. Go to church. We happen to have church on Saturday. So Saturday's your day off. Go to church on Saturday. What's awesome about having services on Saturday and Sunday is if you're off on the weekend, you could go to church on Saturday and not even get out of bed on Sunday. Or vice versa. I mean, seriously, that's pretty awesome, right? We're blessed here to have all the options. If we're not arrested people, I don't even know what, right? Okay, I've gone a little bit long. I'm going to end this service in a way that I can honestly say I have never ended before, except for last night and first service. Okay? I'm going to show the Shabbat scene. Shabbat is a little ceremony that Jewish people do on at the beginning of Sabbath on Friday evenings. It's a little ceremony with all these blessings and prayers and songs. I'm going to show the Shabbat scene from Fiddler on the Roof. Okay? And it's going to have actually a bunch of words that you can read, and they're not completely 100% word for word accurate on what they would say, but the themes are there, and a lot of it is actually what is typically sung by Jewish people. We're not Jewish, I get that, but I want you to participate in this little Shabbat moment from Fiddler on the Roof. If you want to sing them out, if you want to say out the blessings or whatever, you can.
May the Lord protect and defend you. May He always shield you from shame. May you come to be in Israel a shining name. May you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. Strengthen them, O Lord, and keep them from the strangers' ways. May God bless you and grant you long life. May the Lord fulfill our Sabbath prayer for you. May God make you
good mothers and
May He
wives.
send you husbands who will care for you. May the Lord protect and defend you. May the Lord preserve you from pain. Favor them, O Lord, with happiness and